It was Christmas Eve, and I stood at the window watching the scene unfold in my own driveway. The red bow on a brand new luxury car gleamed under the holiday lights, catching everyone's attention. My son's face glowed with pride as he handed over the keys not to me, his mother who had raised him, but to Linda, the woman who had only recently entered our family. Laughter filled the air. Joy radiated from their faces, and I felt the sting deep in my chest. That car was worth more than I could even imagine spending in my lifetime. To them, it was the perfect gift for the woman they had started calling Mom Linda. And what about me, the mother who had given up everything to see my son grow, thrive, and build his life? My gift sat in my lap, light as air, a plastic piggy bank, pink, cheap, with 3 crumpled dollar bills inside. They said it was symbolic because I had always been careful with money, but I could not ignore the humiliation of holding that childish toy while another woman drove away in a $60,000 car. I smiled on the outside because that's what mothers do, but inside, I was breaking. I could feel the invisible line being drawn, Linda on one side, cherished and celebrated, and me on the other, fading into the background of my own family. 35 years of sacrifices, sleepless nights, and endless giving had somehow been reduced to $3 lonely. As the sound of the car engine faded into the distance, I sat in silence with my so-called gift. That was the moment it became painfully clear I was no longer the center of my son's love or loyalty. Something had shifted, and as I looked down at that piggy bank, I couldn't help but wonder how everything had come to this point and what role Linda truly played in it all. This wasn't just a Christmas gone wrong. It was the beginning of something much darker. And to understand how I ended up here, you'd need to know the story of all I had given and all I had lost, long before that night. I sometimes think back to the years when my entire world revolved around my son. I was the one who woke before dawn to pack lunches, who stayed up through the night when fevers burned. I worked double shifts to cover his college tuition, took out loans so he could have the wedding of his dreams, and even dipped into my savings to help with the down payment for his first home. Every milestone in Marcus's life carried a piece of me in it, my time, my energy, my sacrifices. After my husband passed, it was just me, holding everything together. I never complained, because that's what mothers do. We give, and we keep giving, until we have nothing left to offer but ourselves. And yet, somewhere along the way, I became invisible. At family gatherings, I noticed the shift first in the little things. Marcus would look to Linda when decisions needed to be made. Kayla, his wife, linked arms with her as if they'd known each other forever. They started calling her Mom Linda, a title that cut like glass every time I heard it. To them, I was still Mom, but not with the same warmth, not the same respect. It was as if my 35 years of raising him had been quietly replaced in less than a year. I remember one dinner vividly. I had spent 6 hours in the kitchen preparing his favorite holiday dishes, the ones I knew by heart because I'd cooked them every year since he was a boy. I made honey-glazed ham, homemade rolls, even Kayla's favorite trifle, though no one else cared for it. My hands were raw from scrubbing dishes. My back ached, but I told myself it was worth it to see my family together. Yet when Marcus complimented the meal, he turned to Linda with that same adoring look he once reserved for me, thanking her for helping organize everything as if I had just been a cook in the background. The more Linda inserted herself, the smaller I felt. She showed up at doctor appointments, gave her opinions on insurance policies, even asked questions about Tom's pension as if it were her business. I told myself she was just trying to help. But deep down, I began to wonder, was she helping? Or was she slowly replacing me? I would catch myself staring at her polished silver hair, her designer clothes, her effortless confidence. She had a way of making everyone lean in when she spoke. Meanwhile, I was the one clearing plates, refilling glasses, quietly slipping into the shadows. I was no longer the heart of the family. I had been relegated to the background of my own life. What hurt most was Marcus's blindness to it all. He didn't see how Linda's presence dimmed mine. Or maybe he chose not to see. Perhaps it was easier for him to let her take over, to pretend she was filling a void I had never left. Each time he smiled at her with pride, I felt another crack inside me. That Christmas night, after everyone had finished eating and the laughter had moved into the living room, I stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by dirty dishes and leftover food that no one offered to take home. The sound of their joy floated down the hall while I stacked plates in silence. And then, almost by accident, I noticed Linda's purse, sitting on the counter, left behind in her excitement. A black leather bag, elegant and expensive, its weight seeming deliberate. At first, I thought it was carelessness, but something about the way it rested there, right next to that ridiculous piggy bank with its 3 lonely bills, felt intentional, like the universe had placed it there for me to notice. My heart quickened. For the first time, I felt the stirrings of suspicion, the sense that this was not just about favoritism or a son forgetting his mother. There was something deeper at play, and as I wiped my hands on a towel, I knew I couldn't ignore it. That purse was calling to me, and with it, the possibility of answers I wasn't sure I wanted to find. When I first noticed Linda's purse on the counter, I told myself I would just keep it safe until she came back. That's what any decent person would do. Right. But as I stood there staring at that sleek black leather bag, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just forgetfulness. The way it sat there, positioned almost too neatly beside that humiliating little piggy bank of mine, felt like an invitation, or maybe even a dare. I carried it into my bedroom, my hands trembling a little. I told myself it was only to make sure nothing important had been left exposed. Maybe she had medication inside. Maybe her wallet could slip out. That was the story I whispered to myself. But deep down, I knew I was crossing into new territory. The first thing I noticed was the weight. It was heavy, far heavier than any everyday purse needed to be. When I unzipped it, the truth spilled out like a wave. A wallet thick with bills, nearly $400 tucked neatly inside, along with more credit cards than I could count. Not the sort of collection a woman who claimed to live simply would carry around. But it was what I found folded behind her driver's license that made my stomach drop. Bank statements. Fresh, crisp, dated just a week earlier. The balances were staggering, filled with more zeros than I had seen since Tom's life insurance payout. For someone who seemed so grateful for my son's generosity, Linda certainly wasn't short on money. Then came the real blow. Tucked into the side pocket were notes, scraps of paper with my family's names scrawled across them. Marcus's work schedule, Kayla's favorite shops, even details about me, my doctor's office, the type of prescriptions I took, the exact date of Tom's passing. Seeing my life reduced to bullet points in someone else's handwriting felt like a punch to the chest. I sat there in Tom's old recliner, the one Marcus once tried to convince me to throw away. and spread the papers out on the dresser. My hands shook as I flipped through them, but beneath the fear, something else started to burn. Anger, determination. For months, I had felt myself shrinking, becoming invisible in my own family. But here was proof that Linda's presence wasn't just coincidence or charm. She was studying us, calculating something. It was no accident that purse was left behind. She wanted me to see, or maybe she wanted to test me, to measure what I would do with what I found. So I took out my phone and quietly began photographing everything. Every bank statement, every note with my family's names, every detail that felt too invasive to be innocent. I didn't know yet what game Linda was playing, but I knew this much: I wasn't going to stay blind any longer. And as I zipped the purse shut and placed it back exactly as I had found it, I realized the betrayal I'd felt that evening was only the beginning. Something far bigger was unfolding, and my family was right at the center of it. The more I sat with what I had found in Linda's purse, the more the pieces began to shift into place, and the picture they formed was darker than I wanted to admit. At first, I told myself maybe she was just nosy. Maybe she liked to keep records of things. But no ordinary family friend carries bank statements and notes about other people's lives in her purse. The truth was gnawing at me, and I knew I couldn't stop with just one discovery. So I began to dig deeper. I started with what was closest to home, my house. It had always been my safe place. The home Tom and I built together brick by brick, memory by memory. When I came across the appraisal documents, my hands nearly went numb. An appraisal had been filed just a few months earlier, without my knowledge or my consent. The paper stated estate planning purposes, with my son Evan listed as the authorizing party, and the signature at the bottom, the one that was supposed to be mine, wasn't mine at all. I stared at it for what felt like hours. It was close enough to pass, but I knew every curve of my own name. Tom used to joke that my signature was as steady as my cooking hand. But the one on that form was wrong, careless in the details, too quick in the strokes. It was a forgery, and it had been used to give Evan authority over my affairs. My own son, whether he realized it or not, had been written into a role that stripped me of my independence. That realization broke something inside me. It was one thing to feel overlooked or replaced at the dinner table. It was another to see legal proof that my identity, my autonomy, had been stolen. And yet the betrayal didn't stop there. I confronted the story Evan and Kayla had been telling, that Evan had gotten a big promotion, that life was finally comfortable. But when I checked, the truth was far from that. He hadn't been promoted at all. He'd been written up at work, struggling under the weight of debt and disappointment. They had even taken out a second mortgage just to stay afloat. And yet somehow, there had still been enough money for a $60,000 car wrapped in a red bow for Linda. I felt torn in two directions at once. Part of me devastated by the idea that Evan could be complicit in hurting me. Part of me wondering if Linda had played on his desperation and reeled him into her scheme. Either way, it didn't change the outcome. I was standing in the middle of a betrayal that threatened to swallow everything I had left. The cruelest irony came when I discovered who Linda's son really was. Aaron. She had spoken of him only in fragments, as if he were distant or unimportant. But when I searched, I found the truth staring back at me in bold letters on a law office website. Aaron Chen, an attorney specializing in elder law. Not just that he was known for prosecuting financial abuse and fraud against the elderly. My breath caught when I read those words. Her son built his reputation protecting people like me from predators like her. It was almost too much to process: the forged documents, the hidden debts, the lies about promotions, the cruel irony of Aaron's profession. I sat in silence, grief and anger swirling until they settled into something sharper: clarity. I could have picked up the phone that night and reported everything, but something in me knew it wasn't time yet. If I acted too soon, Linda would slip through the cracks, spin her lies, and paint me as the confused old woman who didn't understand. No, I needed to be smart. I needed to play her game better than she ever expected. So I put the papers back, hid my notes, and steadied myself. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. This was about survival. I wasn't going to rush in and give her the upper hand. I was going to wait, plan, and strike when she least expected it. And when I did, it would not just expose her, it would protect what was left of my family, whether they deserved it or not. When Linda called and suggested we meet for coffee, I knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted to test me, to see if I would bend under her charm and manipulation. But what she didn't know was that I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to resist her outright anymore. I was going to play along. If she thought she had me fooled, she would let her guard down. And that's when I'd finally see the full scope of her scheme. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. Linda had chosen a corner table with a clear view of the door, her back against the wall like someone who never wanted to be surprised. She looked polished as always, smiling with that syrupy sweetness that had once disarmed me. I returned the smile, but inside, I was ice. My phone was tucked safely in my purse, the recorder running before I even sat down. She wasted no time easing into her pitch. She spoke about how much she cared for me, how she wanted to help me maximize my assets so I could feel secure. Then she pivoted to the house, my house, the one Tom and I had poured our lives into. According to her, it was a treasure that was just sitting there. She described a plan where I would sell it to an investment group she claimed to work with, then lease it back at a reasonable rate. The words sounded polished, practiced, almost too smooth, but underneath them was the raw truth: she wanted my home. I nodded slowly, pretending to be overwhelmed but intrigued. I asked gentle questions, the kind that would make me sound uncertain but open. That seemed to encourage her. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice like she was letting me in on a secret. Offshore accounts, tax shelters, time-sensitive opportunities. She painted a picture of urgency, insisting the window to act was short, that waiting too long would mean losing everything. As she spoke, I watched her face carefully. Every shift of her eyes, every flicker of greed, every small hesitation when I pressed her about details, I took it all in. And while I kept my voice soft and my expression trusting, inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: power. She thought she was reeling me in, but really, I was tightening the net around her. The longer she talked, the more reckless she became, outlining strategies that veered dangerously close to money laundering. She dressed it up with jargon, but I recognized the desperation behind it. She needed me to believe. She needed me to hand her the keys to my life. I smiled sweetly, told her I would think about it, and let her pat my hand like she'd already won. But as I walked out of that cafe, the weight in my chest wasn't fear anymore. It was resolve. She had just handed me everything I needed: her voice, her promises, her lies captured safely on my recorder. For the first time in months, I felt steady, certain, Linda believed she had me cornered, but the truth was the opposite. I had her exactly where I wanted her. And soon, she would realize that this so-called helpless widow wasn't the prey she thought I was. She was the trap she never saw coming. The day of the confrontation came sooner than I expected. Marcus and Kayla sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had spent years serving meals, patching up scraped knees, and listening to dreams about their future. But this time, the air was heavy, thick with tension. Linda was there too, confident as ever, with that polished smile she wore like armor. She still believed she had me in her pocket. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity and showing my son the truth. I began with the forged documents, sliding them across the table. I explained how my signature had been faked, how an appraisal had been ordered without my knowledge, and how it all pointed back to Linda's influence. Her smile faltered, just slightly at first, then cracked as I pulled out the next piece, the recordings. I played her own words back into the room, her voice describing offshore accounts, tax shelters, and time-sensitive deals. The color drained from her face. She tried to laugh it off, but the sound was hollow. Marcus looked at me, then at her, and I could see the realization hitting him like a storm. He had been manipulated, pulled into a lie that nearly destroyed his own family. His eyes filled with shame, and for a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. Linda's composure collapsed under the weight of the evidence. She stammered, tried to twist the story, but there was no escaping the truth. Every detail was laid bare: the cash, the notes, the surveillance, the lies. I sat tall, calm, and steady, watching the web unravel around her. For the first time in a long while, I felt powerful, not because I had hurt her, but because I had refused to let her destroy me. Marcus finally turned to me, tears in his eyes, and whispered an apology so raw I could feel its weight. It wasn't full redemption, but it was the beginning of one. As Linda lowered her gaze, stripped of her charm and control, I knew justice had been served. My dignity was mine again, and no one, not even Linda, could take it from me. And with that, I was ready to move from battle into reflection, knowing this story had changed all of us forever. In the end, what I learned is simple but powerful: betrayal can come from the people we trust most, but so can redemption. I discovered that resilience isn't about never being hurt. It's about standing tall when someone tries to take your dignity away. I found the courage to draw boundaries, to protect what I'd built, and to remind myself that my worth could never be measured in gifts or lies. If my story resonates with you, I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. And if you believe in standing up for yourself, please like this video and subscribe.